listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again today. Just like any other time, we have another special guest today. Today, we have a true honor talking to Phyllis E. Leavitt. She has an amazing book that you can pre-order right now. It's America in Therapy, a new approach to hope and healing for a nation in crisis. First and foremost, you can bookmark or have a mental bookmark for her website, phyllisleavitt.com, where you can find more information about the book and pre-order on Barnes & Nobles. And without further ado, I just want to say thank you, Phyllis, for your time. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great.
You are not just an author that has an amazing book that people can get soon, but you also are a psychotherapist and you have a story, just like most successful individuals. Kind of paint the picture for our audience a little bit about your career and what caused you to want to write this book.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. And I think, like so many people, my book came out of my experience, my personal experience and my professional experience. And I actually became a psychotherapist because I had a really helpful experience going to psychotherapy myself for some really difficult early childhood trauma experiences. Turned me on to therapy when I was in my 30s. And I went to the library immediately and started taking books out on psychology and ended up going to graduate school and becoming a psychotherapist myself. So that's the short version of a long story.
When it comes to the book that you wrote, America in Therapy, why do you think this is such a timely book for readers who need to be more educated on this topic?
Thank you. That's such a good question because, I had the idea for this book many years ago, but I didn't actually write it until the last couple of years fully. And so I do think it's very timely. I think more than ever, the missing piece in what's going on in our focus and in our attention is our mental health. And I think that one of the big things that I learned as a family therapist and as a client myself, and everything I learned was from those two things, is that our conditioning within our families has so much to do with how we feel about ourselves, the coping mechanisms that we develop, the ways that we relate to other people, whether it's functional or non-functional or dysfunctional or abusive. So much of that has to do with our conditioning. And what I've learned, especially working with couples and children and individuals and families, is that those family dynamics apply everywhere, not just to our family of origin, but the larger communities we live in also are conditioning agents. How our community feels about us, how our community treats us, our school, our places of worship, our businesses, and our governments. And I began to see that the fundamentals of family dynamics apply everywhere. And so if we're conditioned by either healthy or not healthy dynamics in our own families, we are also being conditioned by healthy or not healthy dynamics in our country. And I really felt like I had to write about that because a lot of the dynamics that come down from the positions of power and people in power in America today, and this is really all over the world, not just America, a lot of the dynamics, a lot of the practices, a lot of the laws, a lot of the policies are not serving a lot of people, and they're actually harming a lot of people the way that abusive parents harm their children. And I felt like I needed to write about that because I love America and I hope for healing in our country, and I hope for all people to be treated well, just like I hope that in families. And the whole gift of psychology is that we help people do that. We help people heal what's broken in their families or what's not working or what's harmful, to bring them back into a place of safety and love and cooperation and connection. And I wrote this book to apply those principles to what's going on in America today, because I feel that we're at great risk for even further harming ourselves and our neighbors.
When it comes to mental health, is a it's been a topic that has been floating around on many outlets. I would say probably since last year, I've been really seeing a lot of shows picking up on this topic. You, as a professional psychotherapist, kind of explain what your role is in that field and how you deal with mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think because my original title for my book was Out of the Office and Into the World. How do we take the principles and the best healing modalities and understandings out of our individual offices and make them common knowledge in the world? And part of the role of a psychotherapist, besides having skills, like inner child work or hypnosis or psychodynamic work or behavioral therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy or you name it. There's so many different wonderful tools and techniques that therapists use to help people undo some of the worst conditioning that they're suffering from in their present day life. But we don't all have to be therapists to help each other heal. And so I try to talk about that in my book, that I think there's so many people who want to play a part and they don't know what to do. And so I talk about several things in my book. One of them, some of them are broad, like we have to rework our power issues in America and in our personal lives. I think a lot of people are operating on an old paradigm of, I have to win the argument. I have to dominate you to get my way. You have to see that I'm right and you're wrong. And we have a lot of this going on at very high levels of government and large institutions today. And that power dynamic is hurting so many people. And what we know in the field of psychology is that when a couple comes to therapy, for instance, we don't try to have one person beat the other in the argument. We try to help them hear each other and hear what's valid for each person and come together and make agreements and reconnect and feel like they have a new sense of belonging and reconnection with one another, because that's what brings safety and peace and a thriving couple or individual or family. And I think we need those same principles to look at our power dynamics, because we're still in the old paradigm of one party has to beat the other one and has to shame them and blame them and vilify them in order to get their way, instead of like a role model of bringing people together to actually work out their issues in peace and harmony for the good of the American family. And I can't say that strongly enough, because that's what we want from parents, right? We want parents to work out their problems for the good of their children and the good of themselves, not fight till the end. And we know in our offices that children who are in families where the adults keep fighting and fighting, those children suffer and they become symptomatic. And we as citizens are suffering and becoming symptomatic. So that's a big picture thing. And then in the like maybe smaller microcosmic sense, I have a chapter that I call the 6 elements of repairing relationship. And, most of us know how to fight. We know how to argue. We know how to disagree. We know how to cause divides, and people don't always agree. And that's the way we are as humans. That's okay. That's normal. And sometimes it's important to have more than one point of view, because more than one person has something valid to say. But we have to have a way to repair the relationship once those divisions have happened. So I have a chapter that's called the 6 elements of repair. And I feel very strongly that those 6 elements are really needed in our country on a massive scale. And if they could be introduced into something like Congress, or the way government works, or offices work, or schools work out, disagreements between children on any level. And I'll just say, because I know that you probably have other things you want to go to, but I'll just say quickly that the 6 elements of repair are based on me taking responsibility for myself rather than blaming you, because we all want to be heard. And the point is, we don't know how to listen. And the more I take responsibility for myself and not just keep pointing the finger at you or trying to win the argument with you, the more likely you are to hear me, and the more likely I am to hear you. So I'm happy to discuss that more, but I want to go wherever you want to go in the conversation.
Once again, listen to Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Phyllis Leavitt. You can go to her website, phyllisleavitt.com. You can pre-order her book that is coming out in July 9th. It is called America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. Let's talk about crisis because point of your book, too, is you're introducing an idea of interrupting the cycle of violence that can contribute to a crisis. And when it comes to trying to prevent a crisis in this country, I mean, mental health is a hot topic. We have a lot of news that involve shootings, a lot of violence in this country, and it's more visible than ever. Now you can see it on social media. It's in your pocket. It's everywhere you go. You can see it. And the problem with some of those situations is that it can be in an endless cycle because everyone's talking about it, so it's rehashed. You see it on the news, but then now your friends, your family's talking about it, everybody's talking about it, then everybody has opinions. Right. What are some of the things that you're putting inside the book to address that issue when it comes to violence, the cycle of violence that we see in this nation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to look at the individual family in relationship to our larger family systems. Just like if we're treating in psychotherapy an individual person, maybe just one person comes to therapy, they're depressed or they're anxious or they're having addiction issues or they're raging or whatever their problem is that is causing them enough pain to come for help. They're a product of their environment to some extent. There's nature and there's nurture. But I think we have to really focus on nurture because we learn from our families and the institutions around us what's expected of us. How do people resolve conflict? Do they resolve conflict? What are the roles for men and women? What is success? What are consequences? What are rewards for different behaviors? We learn all these things in our family systems. And if you're in an abusive family, you learn that the way people deal with conflict is to rage and hurt each other. And then we take that out into the world with us. So many of us do. Not everyone does, but many people do. And the other side of that is many people who are the subject of some kind of abusive dynamic in their family don't become ragers. They become really passive and easily manipulated and controlled because they've learned that having power is dangerous. Standing up to an abusive parent or family member is dangerous. And so they become passive and easily manipulated. And so we have to look at the microcosm of the family in relationship to the larger family systems, because if the family system of America is hurting large groups of people, the poor, certain minority populations, and when we know this is going on, that we're having masses of people who are becoming symptomatic with no help. And then one of them picks up a gun and goes into an elementary school and kills innocent children. And so we have to look at not only the family they came from, but the larger family systems they're interacting with and that have affected their family. So if they're in a family where they've been discriminated against, they don't have access to mental health help, they don't have access to education, good education or health care or food even, then we have to look at all of those family systems and be responsible for all of them.
With that point being made, if someone is listening to this and they're thinking, well, on one end, yes, the government should have responsibility in creating resources, education systems, and opportunities for people to have a chance to be educated, to have an opportunity to know, okay, there's help out there or there's resources out there. But also there are individuals who, no matter how much you help them, they might just act out regardless. What would you think on the community level individuals can do collectively to help nurture those individuals to get the help that they need or support those individuals that potentially could be at risk?
I think that's a really good question. And I think where we are right now in terms of the ways that we address mental health and understand mental health in our country is that there are people, like you say, that we actually don't know how to help. They're so injured by what other people have done to them or what their life circumstances have produced in them that we don't know how to make them safe in society. But that being said, and I'll come right back to that being said, there are many more people that we could help if we didn't have a mindset of they're just bad and they need to be locked up and throw away the key. There are many people, statistics show that of the people incarcerated in America, for instance, more than half of them have suffered some kind of abuse or neglect in childhood that is untreated. So what if we were committed to a criminal justice system that was designed to do our very best to rehabilitate people, to bring them care and understanding, even if some of them need restraint because we don't know how to make them safe for themselves and others, that we're still committed to seeing them as human beings that something bad happened to that left them with, no resources for good coping mechanisms, and they've acted out terribly sometimes in society. But I quote this man all the time. I don't know if you've heard of Brian Stevenson, but I believe that he works with trying to get people released from prison who were wrongfully, imprisoned. But he works a lot with the criminal justice system. And one of the things that he said that I love to quote, because I have found this to be true as a psychotherapist, is no one is the worst thing they've ever done. And I like to add to that, no one is the worst thing that ever happened to them. We have an essence inside that can be reached. We're all born innocent, perfect little human beings. And then something happens to us, and some of us adapt well, and some of us don't. But inside, everyone is this essential human being, and we can commit as a society to helping heal and find and heal that part of every single person. Whether we can do that successfully right now, we probably can't, and that's okay because we have to start somewhere. But what I would say is if we bring the focus of mental health and healing families on all levels to our country, we're going to help over time eliminate some of the worst effects on people and some of the worst of crime. Because that's what happens on an individual level. People heal. And when they heal, they're more loving, they're more cooperative, they're more generous, they're more kind, they're less self-centered, they're more creative.
Mm-hmm. And with a wide audience that could read your book, from policymakers to young adults who are just trying to navigate an uncertain future, what do you think are some of the insights that might resonate with a broad perspective of people that can be universal as far as the approach of it takes one person at a time to adopt these ideas and principles?
Right. Yeah, I think that there's two things. One, if you're really suffering, see if there's anywhere you can get help, whether it's from a friend, someone in your church, a hotline, a therapist, a community mental health center that might be free or minimal cost. If you're really hurting and you're really finding that you have coping mechanisms that don't serve you and don't serve your relationships or your children or your spouse or your job, reach out. It's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness, to get help. Nobody criticizes you for going to get someone to fix your car. So why do we have to feel like it's a sign of weakness to reach out for help with our mental health? So I would start there. It takes courage, it takes strength, and I can't tell you how much benefit you can get from just not keeping all that pain to yourself. That being said, if that's not the position you're in, we all can affect each other. We know that hatred affects people, violence affects people. Well, love and compassion and understanding affect people just as much, if not more. can be friendly to your neighbor. Be kind to the person who's having a hard time in line in front of you, or to the person on the other end of the phone who, you're not getting satisfaction from. Being kind to other people is free. It costs nothing. And it makes a difference in so many people's lives. I've had many clients over the years who have said to me, no one ever told me they loved me. That is just heartbreaking. Our families are suffering in America. And what I've learned, and I always say this, and I love to give this message because it's such a simple one, but I don't hear it enough. All of my experience has shown me that love and caring and cooperation are the best foods for human beings. They make us the healthiest. They make us the safest. They allow us to express our greatest gifts when we're loved and we're safe and there's cooperation around us. And I'll add this last one, although there's many other things I could add to the list. When we're committed to nonviolent conflict resolution, it brings out the best in people. I have never had a client in all the years that I've been a therapist who did some kind of real healing work, who became more violent, hateful, mean, unkind, uncooperative. Never. I've never seen that, because when we help people heal, they become more loving, generous, kind, cooperative, and peaceful. And that's what I'm looking for our country.
Once again, listen to Focus Radio, talking to Phyllis Leavitt. You can go to her website, phyllisleavitt.com. We're also talking about her book that you can pre-order on Barnes & Noble, or you go to her website for more information on that. But it comes out July 9th of this year, and you can pre-order it right now. Book entitled that we're talking about is America and Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. Speaking of conflict, we see a lot of conflict in this world. Mm-hmm. And to your point, we can do something about the conflict that we have with each other in this nation. We may not have control outside of this nation, but we can at least control what we do to our other neighbor inside our own country.
That's right.
What are some of the things that you hope people can do collectively? Like, is this something that should be introduced in schools? Because apparently schools have been having some hot topics with education. Would this be a very generic, easy approach to introduce in school systems to teach kids about empathy and maybe consider how they treat their neighbor?
100%. 100%. Instead of looking at children, for instance, who maybe bully somebody on the playground, yes, you want to stop them from bullying somebody on the playground, but take that child aside. Ask them what's bothering them. What's it like at home? Is somebody bullying them? Is something hurting them? Are they afraid of something? Because children just don't become bullies unless there's, something isn't working. And it could be that there's abuse or neglect of some kind happening to them. Or it could be, and this is a topic I touch on in my book, because I think we also see this. There are some children who are never given limits and boundaries. And so they have no sense of where they end and somebody else begins, and they want to take up all the space. And they become bullies from that point of view. But whatever it is, it's an unhealthy dynamic. A child on a playground, for instance, who becomes a bully needs help, not just punishment. And that's what I'm saying for so many people who end up in the criminal justice system. They need help, not punishment. And so that's a really big one. And I think, I'm sorry, I need you to ask that question again. I've lost my train of thought here.
Oh, you're fine. Part of it too was, would you think this be something that could be introduced in school systems, trying to reach students while they're young?
100%. And to understand that, like, I have people that report to me now that there's really overt discrimination happening among children in the school system. People calling children of color names and acting out on them. And it's the school's responsibility. And this is where I talk about the family systems are outside of our family, as well as inside of our family. The school is a family system. We need to educate some of the educators to sit down with children and talk to them about the effects of bullying and talk to them about how each person is worthy of love and how would they like to be treated, or whatever bullying interventions. There are programs for intervention in bullying that work really well. And we need to see those things happen on a large scale. I would also like to see that the world of psychology and family systems and family therapy is taught as part of our curriculum, starting in high school, maybe even starting in junior high. But so that, if I had known about family dynamics and psychology and what influences us when I was young, it would have made all the difference in my life. And I think a lot of young people could really benefit from understanding healthy family dynamics, not healthy family dynamics, and having access to being able to say, something's going on in my family that's not good. My parents are raging, or my mother's an addict, or my father is beating someone, or whatever, without feeling like they're just going to get their family in trouble, but that they could get their family help. And that's a whole different worldview, and it would change so many people's lives.
Once again.
And of course, I would love to see these principles in Congress. Active listening, facilitated conversation, respect, deep listening, taking responsibility for one's own actions and not pointing fingers, all of these things I would love to see on every level of society, because they heal, because they bring people back together, because they make us safe for each other.
And with that note, I would say too, that wouldn't hurt for debates either, because to your point, debates are traditionally all about who can beat the other person. And that's fine, but consider the division that's in the country currently. Presidential debates might be a little bit more entertaining if we actually heard both of the debaters finish their thought versus being cut off.
One of the things that I really wish is that, in line with what you're saying, is that if you think about two parents in a family, you would hope that what they're talking about is how to help everybody. What's best for the family? What's best for them as a couple? What's best for their children? What's best for them as a family unit? And how to juggle all those needs in some way that is the best possible that they are able to do. And that's what I would hope for our leadership in our country, that when there's a debate, we don't hear name calling and put downs and attacks, because that's not what we want to hear from our parents, or, the family members in our families. I would love to hear the debates be focused on, what are we going to do for America? What are we going to do for poor people? What are we going to do to help create more jobs, better housing, more affordable health care, more access to higher education? These are what people actually need in their lives, better wages. That's what I think our debates should be talking about. And I don't understand why they're not. I don't understand why the general public doesn't demand that. So my hope is that by talking about these things, we're educated enough to say, we don't want to hear you attack each other. We want to hear what you're going to do for America's families and our children.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to be preaching to the choir there, because I feel like every time we cycle through the 4 years, it's the same thing of what the citizens want. But obviously, politicians, they just kind of say what they think the people want to hear, and then it just kind of cycles every 4 years. But to your point, maybe this can be something that someone can listen to and kind of poke someone on the shoulder and say, hey, consider this maybe. And maybe that can change the tone, how things trickle down the line, if you will, from the top of the country to our citizens who are on the front lines of our jobs and communities.
Right. And I hope to be one of, hundreds and thousands of voices of people saying, we've had enough of this. This is hurting too many people. It's not accidental that we have more and more mass shootings. We have more and more disaffected people who have lost touch with their own humanity because they're not treated well. And I hope we can get that message and look at how we treat each other as our number one priority.
And this can be another 30-minute conversation, but if I could say something to that, I would say I think if people spent more time thinking about what you're saying versus spending less time trying to argue their point,
right,
they might know that listening is a little bit more powerful than speaking loudly.
Absolutely. And just if I can throw this note in, for anyone who wants to visit my website, I am about to put up, it's not there yet, but I'm about to put up a guide to, it's called The 6 Secrets of Repairing Relationship. And it's a guide that you can implement in your own life. So stay tuned on my website because it'll be up soon as something that you can get for free.
Perfect. Well, you can visit her website. It's phyllisleavitt.com, and also go to Barnes & Noble. It's a link on her website where it take you to the book that we've been talking about on the show. And that's America in Therapy, A New Approach to Hope and Healing for a Nation in Crisis. You can get that book on pre-order. It'll be out and published on July 9th of this year. Once again, Phyllis, I want to say thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. You've been a great podcast host, and I really enjoyed your questions.